I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing.
Antifa!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We have a wonderful show for you today. We have so many great guests. We have two segments. During the second half of the show, we will be speaking with Rami Khouri and Jamal Abdi, and we will be focusing on Iran and also the impact it's going to have on the rest of the Middle East or Western Asia. But the first half of the show is going to be also a fascinating discussion, and we will be joined by Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, as well as Mikey Weinstein, who is the founder of and president of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. Before we start, please do sorry about that. Am I muted now? I'm good now? Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Before we start, please do like this stream. That's a free way to support the show. Also, please do subscribe, especially because we are doing these extra streams with people. For instance, we've been speaking to people based in Iran, speaking to people based in Europe. We spoke to Jeremy Corbyn. So you don't want to miss any of these. So make sure that you subscribe by hitting subscribe and then the bell. Also, please do become Patreon supporters at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. How long was I muted? Was I muted from the beginning, Brad? Okay, all right, great. So we are going to start and bring on our first segment. Now, again, if you want to see the full show, make sure you join us at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show at the $5 level. That gives you bonus content. If you can't swing that, that's fine. You can still make the show happen at the $1 a month level. So that's $12 a year. Okay, bringing on our first segment. We are so excited. Making his Katie Halper Show debut, so a really historic moment, is Mikey Weinstein, who is the founder and president of Military Religious Freedom Foundation, a church-state separation advocate, former U.S. Air Force Judge Advocate General, and White House counsel under Ronald Reagan. And we are bringing back onto the show a guest favorite, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, a retired U.S. Army colonel, former chief of staff to United States Secretary of State Colin Powell, and an anti-war critic of U.S. foreign policy and a member of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. So welcome, Colonel, and welcome. Do I call you Jag? Mikey? I'm trying to speak militarily correctly.
Jag Weinstein.
Jag Weinstein.
Sorry, guys,
yeah.
I didn't get any audio, but now I can.
Oh, okay, great.
Again.
Since I called Lawrence Wilkerson Colonel, and so I didn't know if I'm supposed to call you Jag.
I can't.
Oh, he can't hear us. Oh, we're having some interesting audio issues. Mikey, Brad, you obviously have Mikey's number. Do you want to call him? And I will kick off the show with the Colonel, and we're going to call you. Okay, great. Okay, so thank you for being such a master of improv. We are doing some experimental theater here. Colonel, thank you so much for joining. You always have such amazing insights into what is happening. And in fact, it's kind of another example, I would say, of media malpractice, that you're not booked on shows constantly that are more mainstream. The corporate media obviously doesn't want to have you on for obvious reasons, but you do independent media, which is great. And you're frequently on Democracy Now! But again, if there were a justice in this world, you would be a household name on mainstream television. Tell us what you think, speaking of the media, what is the most important aspect of this war that the media has been missing or misrepresenting?
Yeah, because of Bibi Weinstein, Bibi Netanyahu's extraordinary strictures on media in Israel, and supplementally on any other media wanting to come into Israel, like Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya, or even U.S. media, none of the word that really reflects what's happening is getting out. And of course, that's Mr. Netanyahu's intent, that we not know what's happening to Israel right now, for example. From video that's been smuggled out and that I've seen, I know that Israel is getting heavily pummeled. Lots of damage is being done. Critical things are being hit. Like, for example, after the war crime, we did and Israel, I guess, hitting Iran's oil facilities and spreading black poison all over 10 million people. Right after that, Iran struck back and hit Haifa. The port of Eilat is already closed down by the Houthis' intrepid action in the Red Sea. So Haifa is the only really big port still functioning, and it's their oil port. So I have no idea what the ramifications of that are because they've shut it down. You can't find out anything about it. All that I know about Israel essentially comes from people who leak it from the region.
Right. Well, this is, of course, something that I think is pretty inconvenient for our media to cover. I'm going to shift gears a little bit because Mikey can join us for the first half. So I'm going to ask some questions about a story that both of you can speak to, which is this very scary, and then we will return after Mikey leaves, Colonel, to more questions that I have for you about fascinating things that you've said about how this is going to impact way beyond the Middle East and going to have major ramifications for China and Russia. So stay tuned for that element of our discussion, people. But Mikey, tell us what you have been hearing about. You've been contacted by whistleblowers who are reporting very scary things about the way that this war, although there's not really consensus among politicians and the administration over whether this is a war or a non-war, but we all know that there's a war that the United States and Israel have launched. This war is being framed as a holy war. So tell us about what you've been hearing from whistleblowers on this.
Right. I think our clients would not even think of themselves as whistleblowers. They're trying to be oath keepers. They're sworn oath to protect, support, and defend the U.S. Constitution, which, by the way, Israel doesn't even have. They don't even have a constitution. Shortly after this war began, I believe it was on Saturday, March 1st in the wee hours, it wasn't too many hours later that we started getting deluge with phone calls from troops from all 5 branches, both in the CONUS and OCONUS, meaning continental United States and overseas. The stories were different, but yet similar, that their supervisors or command chains were showing a very clear degree of euphoria, Katie, glee, and joyousness over the fact that we had engaged in this non-congressionally approved, unprovoked attack. As Larry likes to say, Iran was provoking us just as much as Mickey Mouse was. But they were thrilled because this was clearly showing that we had reached the conclusion shown in their perspective of the end times from the book of Revelation and Armageddon, and that this was all going to serve as a very useful, if you will, accelerant or lubricant to bring this concept of weaponized Jesus back. And, you know, I mean, Christian nationalists are promised a 200-mile-long river, I kid you not, 4.5 feet deep, filled with nothing but the human blood of those that their version of ferocious Jesus has slaughtered at the Battle of Armageddon. We had 110 clients at 30 installations until the story went viral. We went out to with a journalist named Jonathan Larson on Monday, and then it went viral. And then all we're saying now is that we have in excess of 200 clients and in excess of 50 installations. As Larry knows, he's been with us as a wonderful advisory member for many years. Very interesting story how he came on with our foundation, by the way. If he gets to it, I'll let him tell it. But most of our clients are junior enlisted, E1 to E3, O1 to O3, although we have them all the way up to the 4-star admiral and general level. And
by the way, just let me, in case people aren't putting this together. So when you're talking about clients, you are talking about clients from the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, of which
correct clients of our foundation. You can see it's at MRFF.org. These are sailors, soldiers, Marines, airmen, and I'm not sure if you know what they're called in the Space Force, but they're called Guardians, like the Cleveland baseball team. And whenever in the past, since past is prologue, Katie, whenever we've seen a extremist version of any religious faith, particularly extremist Christianity, joined at the hip with that part of the state that engages in war, we do not end up with little babbling brooks, streams, or ponds or lakes. We end up with oceans and oceans of blood, and that's why we are fighting. We've taken this to the court of public opinion nationally and internationally, and that's why we're so pleased to be on your podcast today.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for joining. And something that's fascinating, and then I'm going to turn to you, Colonel, and find out, since Mikey teased it, about the fascinating way that you joined this organization. But before that, Mikey, something I think it's really important for people to know is that this is most of your clients are actually Christian.
95% of, over 100,000, 95% of Christians.
And they are calling in and saying that obviously these are not like anti-Christian people or Christophobes, right? These are people who oppose this totally fundamentalist, rapture-oriented, end times-oriented interpretation of theology, which of course requires Armageddon.
They are Christians in the military that are being horrifically abused by their chains of command, Katie, for not being Christian enough. They are the Christian version, I kid you not, and Larry will put an exclamation mark on this, of ISIS, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the Taliban. And they are in complete control of the technologically most lethal organization ever created by our species, Homo sapiens, which is the U.S. military. All the nukes are there, all the drones, all the chemical weapons, all the laser guided weapons. And so they can come here and they'll get anonymity, and we can go out and speak for them, because if they try to speak up, they turn into what we call here, Katie, a tarantula on a wedding cake. We've all been to lots of weddings. Tarantulas and wedding cakes don't fare well when that happens.
Okay. Yeah, I have been to weddings. I've seen wedding cakes. I've seen tarantulas. I have not seen tarantulas on wedding cakes, but it sounds like not a good situation.
No.
So, and are you getting more and more phone calls about this, or do you think it died down since the story went viral?
I don't want to give too much information other than to say that we are continuing to hear from large members of the U.S. military, large swaths of them, and but what we are saying is more than 200 and more than 50 installations, ranks from the flag ranks, 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, all the way down to people that are actually going through basic training and in the Army AIT.
Okay, great. Now, Colonel Wilkerson, tell us about how you joined this organization, and what are your thoughts on this basically fundamentalist framing of the war?
If you remember the atrocities around Benghazi back a few years ago, 2011, 12 or so, if you remember Hillary Clinton, you remember those events.
What difference does it make?
Well, yeah. Glenn Doherty was a Navy SEAL, retired Navy SEAL, who was a contractor there, and he was killed. And Glenn was an advisory board member to the MRFF. And Mikey called me and asked me if I'd be interested in taking his place. And I said, I got to think about it, because when I left the military long ago, 1997, it seems like an eternity ago to me now, there was a little bit of a problem, but not much. You could handle it. I described to Mikey some of the minimal problems I had, and he said, well, it's very different now. It's very different. So why don't you do a little research, talk to your buddies, et cetera, and then let me know. Well, I did, and I came back and said, I'm with you, because I heard very carefully and from people whose views I felt were completely reliable that it was getting out of hand. And I heard that it was principally initially an alliance between what I call ultra-Zionists and Christians of similar mind. And so I started watching a guy by the name of John Hagee from Texas, who's a preacher, head of the Citizens United for Israel. And I found out that we even had senators and congressmen and others going to Kufi meetings. And so I decided I would check up on that. And I was stunned when I found out the things that John Hagee was saying. And if you want to Google him right now, you can find him saying them right now. He goes up on the stage and he says, epic fury. It is not Trump's fury. It is God's fury. And we are headed for the end time. And you need to be there. That's essentially what he's saying now.
He also says that Hitler was sent by God.
Yes. And I'll tell you another thing I found out about him. He was sending hundreds of millions of dollars that he was raising to settlers on the West Bank and elsewhere in East Jerusalem, for example. He's helping them do what they do. And you got to ask yourself, and Max Blumenthal, for example, did ask him this in a confrontation on camera. What do you say in your book about the unbelievers at the end times? Well, they'll all be slain, he answers.
Yes.
What about the Jews? And he's without words. He's without words. And then later, Max gets him on camera again, including a congressman by the name of Tom DeLay. called the Hammer from
Right,
Texas.
Hammer, right.
You remember him?
Yeah.
And he says, what'll happen? And the congressman looks at him and says, well, they'll all convert.
Right. Now, of course, sorry, keep going.
Well, no, they run into this dilemma, even with
Right.
their philosophy.
Well, of course, I think what happens is that you have, and here I just have some images to show. Let's see. Here is John Hagee with Netanyahu, and this really speaks to exactly what you're talking about. There he is with Netanyahu. Here is another image of him, which speaks 1,000 words, as they say. Let me just share screen here. Here he is with the Jewish star in the background, I assume addressing maybe AIPAC, maybe Israel. But you see, I think the issue is that so you have Christian Zionists and you have Jewish Zionists. And a lot of the Jewish Zionists not all of them are religious. I think there's this myth that you have to be a crazy fundamentalist to be a Zionist. I think to be true, I think there are true believers, Jewish true believers who are religious, Jewish true believers who are secular. In fact, well, fascinatingly enough, the first Zionists, the first political Zionists were Christian. The first Jewish Zionists were atheists. But what I think is that, I mean, I'm not saying anything original, but the Jews, whether they're religious or secular, they think that that is a crazy thing, Armageddon. They don't believe it's going to happen. So they're fine working with these Christian Zionists. The Christian Zionists don't care about the Jews or whether they have to convert or they'll burn in eternity or be in a river of blood. So they're kind of cynically using each other. But what I'm curious about increasingly is, don't the people who don't want Armageddon get that they are in bed with people who are trying to foment Armageddon? Is the idea that they can go with them like halfway and then put the brakes on it? How do they reconcile those two things?
Well, not for a minute do I believe that Armageddon is upon us. I don't even believe in that concept.
Right. No, of course.
I think Christ repudiated the Old Testament, entirely and completely repudiated the Old Testament. So take that, Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee. You're not Christians, because that doesn't mean anything anymore. When Christ threw the moneylenders and went after the Pharisees and the Sadducees, that said, essentially, I'm giving you a new religion. Jews, I'm giving you a new religion. We forget Christ was a Jew.
Right.
So I think this is an alliance of convenience, and both are lying. It doesn't matter whether you're religious or not. You want this sort of progress, war with Iran, for example, and you want a greater Israel, whether you believe in God or not. I think more people that don't believe in him want a greater Israel than do. And you find the alliance convenient. And when the time comes, you're going to discard the other side. That's what's so stupid about it.
Right.
These people are nuts.
Yeah, they really are. Both sides are nuts. Yeah.
Well, look what Mike Huckabee said about he would be all fine with Israel taking
Take it all.
It wasn't promised land, it was promised continent. And I think that people also, I like to remind people about Dwight Eisenhower's most famous speech, which was his last speech, where he warned America and the world about, the military-industrial complex. How serious is all of this stuff with Christian nationalism? I believe we're facing a fundamentalist Christian, parachurch, military, corporate, congressional proselytizing complex. It is immense. And as Larry remembers, because he helped us with this, not this past summer, but the summer before, the MAGA members of the House of Representatives and the U.S. Congress amended the largest part of the federal budget, the National Defense Authorization Act, to make it a felony under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for any sailor, soldier, Marine, airman, or guardian to reach out to us for help. We were in there by name 3 times. Larry worked his wonders with another one of our advisory board members, with the Democrats on the Senate side, and with hours to go, we got that out of it before it went to Biden's desk. But I think we're often more defined by who our enemies are than by our friends, Katie. And so we view that as a badge of courage. But this is not some small thing. This is something that is a national security threat for the world.
Right. Speaking of the lack of separation between church and state, military and church, obviously, right now, the head of the quote unquote Department of War, Secretary of the Department of War, that's insane that he changed it. He has these tattoos. He says that they are not inspired by the Crusades, although there's quite established to be those things. He also he has a Jerusalem cross tattoo, the words Deus Vult, God wills it, which directly traces back to a crusader. And sword stabbing through a shield, which signals choosing strength, or the sword over peace. So I want to show a video of Pete Hegseth from the Aruch Sheva conference in 2018, where he is pretty honest, I think, about his radical Christian beliefs. Now, when I say honest, I actually don't know if these people, which ones are true believers and which ones are just cynics who know that they will get votes and support this way. So we can talk about that with different figures afterwards. Let's take a look at this video, though.
And today,
at
105:45, had a chance to go see the Western Wall of the Temple Mount, the Western Wall tunnels, so much of the old city. And as you stand there, you can't help but behold the miracle before you. And it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away. Because 1917 was a miracle, 1948 was a miracle, 1967 was a miracle, 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital, was a miracle. And there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible. I don't know how it would happen. You don't know how it would happen, but I know that it could happen.
And of course, he's referring to very important dates in Zionist history. So obviously, well, maybe not obviously. 1917 is the Balfour Declaration. 48 is the founding of Israel, also known to those who experienced it as the Nakba. And the 67, of course, is the 67 Days War. So he's very clearly dressing this up as a, related to Israel.
Absolutely. And what frightens me about that is the certainty with which he says these things. I think he's a true believer. I really do. I'm not sure about some of the others. I think Mike Huckabee's a true believer.
Yeah.
And the true believers, to me, are even more dangerous than the non-believers, political exploiters.
Right.
Because the political exploiters you can smell and you can deal with, and you can offer them something that's counter to what they want, and they'll back away from the virulence of it. Not the true believers. The true believers want to cut your throat with their sword and move on and create the miracle. And what is the Muslim world, which is quite copious, going to think about their second or third most holy place being torn down to build a Jewish temple atop it? I mean, this is just preposterous.
You know, Katie, we saw this, what we've been seeing the last 10 days. We got a kind of a hors d'oeuvre of that when the IDF went into Gaza and started its genocide on the Palestinians. We had commanders then saying, it's here, this is our signal, but it was nothing like we're seeing now, because, I mean, this was Israel doing it. And I agree with Larry that it seems like a lot of people, Hegseth has had a lot of crises in his life, womanizing, cheating, and alcoholism. And he finds some sort of a tonic in this particular view of extremist religious faith. We don't care about anybody's religion. We only care about the time, place, and manner in which they want to flaunt it.
Of course, or impose it, their vision, right?
Right. If you're a subordinate in the military and you're being even gently evangelized by your military superior, get the F out of my face, sir or ma'ams. Not an option for you. So that's why they come to us, and we do it for them.
Right. I mean, it's one thing. Oh, sorry, keep going.
I just want to tell you about an experience. A lieutenant whom I knew quite well because he'd been a student of mine is in Iraq in Fallujah, and he's walking through the town, and they're taking fire and they're returning fire. And he says, I hear, this is the first time I really realized this about my platoon, I hear 4 different languages being used. And so the next time we had a meeting, a platoon meeting, I said, guys, you guys, these are all guys, you got to speak in English. I don't speak Spanish. I don't speak Urdu. I don't speak Farsi, because that's how variegated the rifle squads in the military are today. In fact, if you want to look at the dominant group, it's Hispanics. Yeah. And they will start speaking Spanish when their lives are threatened and they're shooting back. That's a problem unless you all get along well and you can operate together. And you can't have one religion dominating that group, because there's everything in that group. There might even be, Mikey can tell you this, there might even be some Wiccans or Jedi Knights in there.
We have 12 clients that follow the Jedi Church. We don't care if they worship that tree or Spider-Man, as Larry said. But, you know, when Hegseth says diversity is our enemy, I look back to history because several of the greatest militaries in the world were incredibly diverse because they conquered all these other countries and brought their people into the military. The Roman military, the British Navy, the British Army, Xerxes in Persia, Alexander the Great. They conquered, and their militaries were incredibly diverse. So that's what we're dealing with.
And Hegseth makes a point of saying that kind of diversity is anathema to him, and he prays over it. Yeah. And I know that he's changing the ranks slowly but surely by doing that, because his recruiting now is aimed at that. His recruiting is aimed at states where fundamentalists predominate and where they're very apt to come in the military, because when you put $50,000 in an 18-year-old's hand in West Virginia or in the interior of Maine or in Oklahoma, that's the most money they've ever seen in their life. They're going to sign on the dotted line. And you tell them they're coming to fight for God, they'll sign twice.
Yeah. And, going back to the discussion, the comments that you just made, Mikey, about, telling people who are trying to proselytize in the military, get the F out of my face, which I hear you. I mean, I as a secular Jew would obviously not appreciate that. But it's even worse than that, right? Like, that's one level of inappropriate mixing of church and state. But it would be one thing if they were like peace-loving Christians and they were just trying to proselytize. I'd be annoyed, but I wouldn't be scared out of my brains. I'm trying not to curse. I wouldn't be very scared. This is, I'd be disturbed and scary on some level, but not scary as in like existential threat, where these people are trying to drive us to Armageddon.
Larry has seen, in the time period when we first reached out and he asked for some time to check things out, it was actually a period of months. We put him in our jet stream so we can just see the stuff that we have to deal with all the time. And I remember because he called me on a Tuesday night and he said, I'm in, I've seen enough. But when you have when you tell someone in the military, Katie, that they lack courage, intrepidity, intelligence, trustworthiness, and character because of their particular chosen religious faith or lack thereof, why, Katie, there's no difference between that and telling someone they're stupid because of the color of their skin or because they were not born a male. And it's clear from Hegseth that the approved solution for the U.S. military is 4 things: straight, white, Christian nationalist, and male.
Right. Yeah.
Let me tell you another very disturbing story. I tried to help Mary Tillman, mother of Pat Tillman, find out the truth about his death. And I was singularly unsuccessful, even though I went to a number of people, including the first officer who did the 15-6 investigation immediately after his death, which is usually the most accurate. Yeah. I went up and around to the JAGs, and bottom line, what I found out was there's a very good chance, I'd say 75 to 80% chance, he was shot by friendly fire intentionally. And the reason was he was an atheist and they were Christians and didn't like his atheism.
So you think it was not accidental friendly fire?
I know it was not accidental.
Well,
I know it.
How do you know?
Yeah.
I know because of the trajectory of the rounds, the type of the rounds, and the fact there was no enemy in the area. And I have that from a number of people who were there.
Wow. Right. Because this was someone, Pat Tillman was progressive. He read Noam Chomsky. In fact, many people were surprised that he went in the first place. So I can imagine that Christian fascists would be offended by his atheism and his political outlook. But that is just horrifying.
Can I tell you a quick story? I'll try to do it fast. Before Larry came on board with us, we'd only been out maybe a year and a half. I got a surprise call one day from Tokyo. And it was from the Kyoto News Service, which is like their Associated Press, covers the entire East. They called up and said, Mr. Weinstein, we're watching what you're doing with your foundation. Could we send one of our reporters from Tokyo out to interview? And I went, I'm in Albuquerque, right? They said, yeah, we know. So I said, that's a long ass way. And they said, yeah, he'll explain what he's doing there when he gets there. So I said, sure. He came to the house. We sat down. He said he was from Tokyo, graduate from Tokyo University, which is like their Harvard. Perfect. He spoke perfect English and said, you probably want to know what I'm doing here. And I think about it every day, his answer. I'm not sure if I even told this to Larry. I probably did. He said, Mr. Weinstein, in 1936, the Imperial Japanese Army invaded Manchuria. And on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, we bombed Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. We did that because fundamentalist Shintoism took control of our military. Now, I got goosebumps telling you that right now. And he said, we're looking at what's happening in your country, and it scares us. That was 20 years ago. I'll never forget that. Most people have no idea. I didn't know that. I went to a military academy. And of course, being Jewish, I didn't know what the Nakba was until I watched some documentary films. So we're only seeing what we're going to be, as Larry said, Netanyahu and the power clench of what they do for media in Israel. But I can tell you, I think about that every day with radical Shintoism taking over the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy. And this is where we are right now. And as I said, our destination is oceans and oceans of blood.
So scary. Well, I have more to show, but Mikey, do you have to leave? Because I know you're on a tight schedule.
I'm enjoying this.
Okay, great. Okay,
I'm going to stay for a little longer.
Okay, well, thank you. So
Yeah.
I wanted to show a clip of Lindsey Graham, who said some really, I know, trigger warning, everyone, who said some really fascinating things the other day on Meet the Press. And this is someone who has very strong opinions about war. He is very excited about this. And he thinks that the religious fundamentalists are not people like Mike Johnson, who goes and tries to bring red heifers to Israel, not people like Pete Hegseth, not people like Paula White, who speaks in tongues and is Trump's advisor. And of course, Trump it's actually cracks me up when I see Trump pretending to be religious, because we all know he's not. So it's really funny when we see him with all these people on his shoulders and he's like, has his eyes closed. But so let's take a look at what Lindsey Graham had to say.
In Iran, but America first is to kill people who wish us ill, with a record of trying to destroy us in the region, to take them off the table. Celebrate today, please, my Democratic colleagues, that the most evil man on the planet is no more. He terrorized his own people. 32,000 people at least have been killed protesting a better life. He was trying to get a nuclear weapon. He was building missiles to hit the United States. He was a religious Nazi that had a horrible agenda for the region and the world. He is no more. Well done, President Trump.
A religious Nazi is what he says about. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
He can't hear me. Oh, Brad, you're gonna have to call him again. Sorry. Okay. We're gonna call you. A religious Nazi, according to Lindsey Graham. What are your thoughts on this? By the way, about a regime, a government that has used so much more restraint than Israel or the United States. Their civilian death count is not comparable at all. They don't target hospitals, refugee camps, tents with journalists in it. So what is your thought about his analysis?
My thought is that, what about Lindsey? Lindsey's from my home state. I know Lindsey. Lindsey, I would like to say to him, how about the tens of thousands, no, the hundreds of thousands that the empire has killed in the last 30 years? How about those? How about in Afghanistan? How about in Libya? How about in Iraq twice? How about in Somalia? How about in a number of other places where we have killed people? Oh, and by the way, do you know we've put over 6 million people into either internal diaspora or external diaspora? You know, we've caused refugees in the world untold, and that's just in the last 20, 30 years, Lindsey. Where have you been during that time condemning all of this that your own country is doing? And usually with minimal threat to the real interest of your country. So why are you doing it? I'll tell you, Lindsey, you're doing it for Lockheed Martin, for RTX, for Grumman, for ExxonMobil. You're doing it for all these corporate interests that pay your $1 million salary in the Senate of the United States. That's who you're doing it for. Quit lying.
So you don't think he's one of the true believers? You think
I do not for a minute. I've known Lindsey for most of his damn life.
Not a believer.
My father once said, I'll not cast another vote for Graham. I said, why? He was an arch Republican. I said, why? I'm not voting for that guy, Jim DeMint, either, because he's an idiot. But Lindsey promised to be term limited. And you see how term limited he is.
Oh, wow.
He did in his first race. He promised he would not stay. He promised.
And he's a military judge advocate himself.
Right.
That, right? Which is just so disgusting to see. So
I mean, we know he says he's excited that they're going to fight till the last Ukrainian. He's very excited about bloodshed and using people as cannon fodder or in other countries, but he doesn't even hide that he's excited about basically sending Americans to their deaths. Now, I want to be clear. I personally don't approve of using or celebrating any war using anyone as a cannon fodder, whether they're American or not. But we all know that this guy's like a jingoist and xenophobe. So to be consistent, you would think he'd at least pretend to care about American lives, but no.
The hypocrisy is the hypocrisy and selfishness and the effusive lick spittle, boot shining of MAGA, particularly Trump. Of course, you could talk about Cruz, you could talk about Rubio, you talk about all of them. It is beyond my ability to tolerate as a human being.
I don't think Cruz. Oh, please.
Because I know something about Lindsey's personal life too. I'm not going to say any more than that.
Right.
I think he's very frightened of Epstein.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow.
As are a lot of these people.
Right.
Including the president himself.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think he's using this conflict to get people's attention off of it.
Right. I'm curious what you guys think. Cruz and Rubio strike me not as true believers. They strike me as cynics.
Yeah.
I don't know about Ted Cruz. That discussion he had with Tucker Carlson, it looked like he was a Huckabee there.
Huh.
It looked like he really does
talk the Huckabee talk. Yeah.
He goes to Genesis for his national security guidance.
Right. The question is just whether he actually does or he's putting it on for his
district in Texas. I know fairly well, and I know how he ran the first time, and I know what his father believed and others around him. And I have a hard time saying it's not genuine with him, but I was a Christian for a long time in that kind of ilk in Texas when I went to high school and when I went to middle school and then first year at Baylor. That's a lot of people I knew in Texas. They're not really seriously following Christ, but they find it very convenient to be in that sect, in that group.
Right.
Katie, I find it fascinating about our country as we close in on celebrating 250 years that our constitutional founding framers were so careful to look at European history, where most of the bloodbaths there had been caused by men in, of the collar, who were men in political positions. They looked at Cromwell in England, and they called this out. They looked at the Salem witch trials. They said, not here. We're going to carve a chasm, a Grand Canyon between spiritual and temporal and between church and state, because it's never worked before. And we have a number of our presidents that did a wonderful job with this. I mean, we used to think it was terrible under the days of George W. Bush. Boy, I take those back in a second now. Larry lived that, with in many ways. And I'm sad also when I see that Trump appointed Erica Kirk to the board of visitors of my alma mater, the Air Force Academy, yesterday, to see how far down this rabbit hole we have gone. And it's something that either we stop and pull ourselves out of the abyss, or we're not going to have anything left anymore other than Gilead from The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood's book and the Hulu series. That's where we're going to be, because we're almost there now.
Well, something that you've mentioned, Larry, is the real risk of Israel using nukes. And I believe I heard you on Democracy Now! Talking about how Golda Meir actually affirmed that they would use them, even though technically Israel hasn't admitted to having them, but everyone knows that they do. So given that, what can the rest of the world do, if anything, if they even wanted to? What could be done about this?
Well, in Golda's defense, I really think this was her favorite BBC reporter, who always bought her a couple of dozen of red roses and everything. Favorite reporter. I think she was using him to scare the Soviets and Washington at the same time. I don't know that she had an intent that way, but I do know from inside sources that they uploaded 2 or 3 bombs, and they were going to drop one on the Egyptian Third Army if the Egyptian Third Army weren't defeated by their own forces, which ultimately occurred. So I don't doubt that for a minute, because it made all kinds of sense. And I don't doubt that they didn't want the Soviets or the Americans to know about it. And Kissinger can talk all day long about it. I'm not going to believe a word he says. But now it's very different, I think. We're looking at a situation. You remember Josephus and his story of Masada and the Roman legion at the foot of the place, and they jumped off and committed suicide, or they committed suicide up top, whichever version you believe. I think we're in a position where Netanyahu has walked himself into a corner where if Israel were existentially threatened and he felt like that meant him going down too, both reputation-wise and physically, he wouldn't hesitate to go. And it's a reasonable response only in the sense that they have the weapons and they can use them, and they would probably be decisive. But beyond that, just like any nuclear weapons use, no matter how limited, it opens the genie. I mean, it lets the genie out of the box. It's first use of nuclear weapons since we did it. Oh, you mean we've used them against live human beings? Yes, twice. So he'll be in good company.
And it's almost scary in some ways because Netanyahu is not religious. So
No.
it's I mean, it really is a suicide mission where he doesn't even think he's going to be,
Well, I don't think it would be. That's the problem with my calculations. I think it would be a game stopper, a game ender. I think the Iranians, as they did, remember when we did El Dorado Canyon and Praying Mantis and we sunk their destroyers and we essentially shot down a civilian Airbus and killed 290 Iranians in one fell swoop, all civilians. And the Ayatollah said, okay, I'll accept the UN resolution. I'll end this conflict. He was beating Iraq. And we threw our weight behind Iraq in order to keep him from marching to Baghdad. And he threw the towel in. I think that might be the same kind of thing that occurred if a nuclear weapon were to go off, say in Tehran in particular, because it would be so colossally destructive in an instant. And I think he would use it for that reason.
Wow.
Take that, you bastards,
Right. That is.
And I'm not sure we wouldn't support him 100%.
Well, look at the commanders again, euphorically thrilled that we're all over Iran. All those little girls that were killed in that school, which of course, according to Trump, lots of different countries use Tomahawk missiles. I know one that does.
Right. Yeah. And then you had, speaking of religious fanaticism, I've gone over this on a couple of episodes of various shows just because I frankly can't believe it. I mean, that's naive, but it's so despicable. You had Matt Clapp, who is at CPAC. He's been a CPAC leader. So Christian Zionist, Christian conservative, also happens to have been accused by multiple young men of sexual assault, sexual harassment. So just an absolute face of hypocrisy. He actually said that it was hypocritical to complain or speak out. I shouldn't say complain. It was hypocritical to condemn the attacks that killed over 150 schoolgirls between the ages of 7 and 12, because if they had lived, they were going to live in a barbaric society in a burqa and have limited career options.
Oh my God.
Which, one, they don't wear burqas. Two, even if they did, we are supposed to celebrate that you're taking them out of their misery. And barbaric, that's projection.
Yep.
These people can rationalize anything. They can. Trump has brought that kind of thinking to our country at its highest levels.
When you have been in the U.S. military.
He's the Secretary of the Treasury, right? He was a South Carolinian. You know why he moved out of South Carolina and up to New York? Because in South Carolina, they made it a constitutional issue that you couldn't be married to a man. You couldn't have same-sex marriage, in other words. And so he had to move or go to jail. So he moved to New York, to a Biden state where it was okay for him to have kids and to be married to another member of the same sex. That's how hypocrisy rankles in this administration.
And Peter Thiel is gay as well. Look, they have a playbook. It was out there. It's 1,000 pages long. Project 2025 is to MAGA as Mein Kampf was to National Socialism. And so I realize the average American they want everything in a 15 or 20 second soundbite. They're not going to watch a video if it's more than a minute, maybe a minute and a half. But where the rubber meets the road is when we've got young troops out there that don't know what else to do. Most of them are Christians, and they can see that in a military environment, as stark as it is, they do not want to attack Greenland. They don't want to attack Cuba, and they want to know that they're doing something in their national interest. They don't want to be judged by whether or not they are a member of the Christian Taliban. So what are they supposed to do? Well, that's why they come to us. That's why we're doing the podcast. That's why we're lucky to have Larry here, who's someone who's a splendid and incredible universal reputation. He's put it on the line for us for 14 or 15 years. And I mean, Larry, I've lost count of the number of times you've reached out and fought on behalf of our folks. But it's something that has to stop, or we're not going to have a democracy anymore. And we're that close. We're this far.
Right. And what about the way that this will affect other parts of the world? I heard you, Larry, for instance, speaking about Russia, China. What are your thoughts on this? And also, you've been saying, you know, that our media doesn't want to talk about this, our politicians don't, but you think that the U.S. is going to get pummeled, and you think that Israel is going to get pummeled. So what are both of your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that we are probably, there's a 50-50 chance, at least right now, we're going to put ground troops in there. And if we put ground troops in there, as Mikey was insinuating, one of the first things that's going to happen, and we've been all across the country in the All Volunteer Force Forum, another group that I belong to, Ohio State, San Angelo State in Texas, Catholic University here, William and Mary. We've been all over talking to young people in the last 15 years. They're not going to be drafted. They're going to go. They're going to go to Canada. They're going to go to Mexico. They're going to make Vietnam look like a parade. I mean, and they are going to mobilize this country because they would have to. We do not have enough ground troops to invade Iran. We simply do not. Marines or soldiers, we do not. We'd have to fully mobilize, and we'd have to go to conscription and a draft. That's real problems for the country. Real problems.
When Larry talks, he taught me something years ago that said, Mikey, because one of my sons was in Air Force recruiting as an officer. Said we don't. When someone tells you we have an all volunteer force, it's not true. We have an all recruited force.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between the two.
And what is that difference? Can you explain? Elaborate.
The difference is you are attracting them with money, religion, and other issues.
Education.
Education. Education was a big one there for a long time.
Medical,
Lately, Hegseth has taken to doing this. Congress put a cap, an absolute cap on the mental category 4s that could be enlisted. That's people who can't read their name on a guard roster. What he did was go out and he recruited 11% category 4. IG reported on him to Congress, and his excuse, his rationale was, well, what we did was we took 7% of them and we educated them and then gave them the test again and they passed it. So he took 11% of people who are, you wouldn't know this term, McNamara's 100,000. That was offensive. Yeah, he put them in Vietnam. Right. And they wound up fragging their officers. Their officers wound up shooting them. Their fellow soldiers wound up shooting them because they were a danger to the entire rifle squad or platoon or whatever they were a member of. So this is a disaster in the making, and we're going to recruit enough people to fight Iran. I'm sorry, you need to think again.
Wow. Well, I also wanted to show a clip. Brad, let me know if this clip is okay. It'll be ready in 30 seconds. But here, I know, Lawrence, you love this woman. You love Karoline Leavitt. Is it Leavitt or Leavitt?
Leavitt.
Leavitt. Okay, I know you're a big fan of hers. But we're going to see. She was asked at a press conference about the Pentagon report that about 140 troops have been injured amid Iran war. That's the headline that I'm reading. So here she is being asked about that. Let's take a look.
Reuters has reported that about 150 U.S. service members have been injured so far. Can you confirm that number and elaborate on that?
I can't confirm the exact number. I know it's within that ballpark, but I would defer you to the Pentagon for a specific number of wounded or injured thus far.
And then secondly, if I can, I wanted to ask about, there was a briefing on the Capitol Hill today, and some senators came out and said they were more convinced than ever that there would be U.S. boots on the ground. Senator Blumenthal said that. In fact, your reaction to that, and any update on President Trump's thinking about it?
Look, I would say that Democrats on Capitol Hill are clearly being quite disingenuous. 3 years ago, not a single Democrat voted against the resolution condemning Iran as the world's leading state sponsor of terror. Yet now, with President Trump as commander-in-chief finally taking the action that so many Democrats have called on the commander-in-chief to do for many, many years to wipe out the threat of a rogue Iranian terrorist regime. Now, all of a sudden, Democrats are playing politics with this long-standing bipartisan policy of the United States, and 53 of them in the House recently voted against the resolution condemning Iran as the world's state sponsor of terror. So I wouldn't take Democrats at their word. As for boots on the ground, the president has talked about this repeatedly. Wisely, he does not rule options out as commander-in-chief. So again, I would hesitate to confirm anything that a Democrat on Capitol Hill says right now about the president's thinking.
Okay, your thoughts?
She's basically lying through her teeth.
Yeah.
What Bill Clinton did was pass an act, got an act passed and signed it, that essentially said regime change was America's objective in both Iraq and Iran. George W. Bush used that as part of his rationale to go to war with Iraq in 2003. But nowhere in the discussions, either in the National Security Council in the White House or on the Hill, was there a policy of going to war in order to effect that regime change without consulting the Congress first. There simply wasn't. Now, we all know that presidents have used the War Powers Act, which I think is unconstitutional and an abridgment of the Constitution, because it does sort of allow the president to use force for a little bit if he reports on it periodically and so forth. Yeah. And that's terrible. They should never pass that act. The Constitution is explicit. And James Madison, the father of the Constitution, was explicit. The war power is the serious, straight path to executive aggrandizement. And that's being shown right now, and it's been shown for the past 20 years. So Blumenthal's right. I know there's politics behind it, but he's right. And he was very right in his choice of words. This will be a disaster if we put ground troops in Iran.
And wanted to play one more clip featuring someone who I believe you both probably know, at least know of, but maybe know personally. It's from around 19 years ago, and it's the retired U.S. Army general and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Wesley Clark during actually a Democracy Now! Interview, but it's very relevant today. I mean, I hope it's not relevant, but I think it is. So let's take a listen.
9/11. About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years. Starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So that's by the way, an interview with Amy Goodman. So it's not on Democracy Now!, but it's with Democracy Now! Host Amy Goodman at the 92nd Street Y. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I was privy to his briefing when he came back to the State Department right after he'd been summarily relieved, really, by Bill Clinton. It wasn't broadcast that way, but he was. And I knew how he had come to that circumstance. And I knew that people were very, very angry with him who had led him to that circumstance. And that's a different story. But I know what he's saying there is accurate, because I got kicked out of the Pentagon as Powell's policy planning member, putting together joint talks between the Joint Staff and the State Department's policy planning staff. We had 3 meetings, and then Rumsfeld found out about us and kicked us out. The military guys were very alarmed that we'd been kicked out because it ended all coordination between the two most important cabinet offices for national security in the administration. And the reason I was kicked out was because I was inadvertently shown what Wes Clark just said.
Wow.
The other thing I was shown was Mossad investing the number 3 man in the Pentagon, Douglas Feith, Undersecretary for Policy's office. Read Dennis Fritz's book, Deadly Betrayal, and you'll see exactly why that happened. They occupied his office virtually 24/7. And they occupied it throughout and gave instructions to Jerry Bremer and others in Baghdad, the war. So, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's just reality. And Rumsfeld once actually, I'm told, I didn't hear him, but it was from a good source, came out of his office one day in frustration, slammed some papers down and said, I don't run this office. Mossad does.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very, very scary. I mean, what is there anything that can be done to stop this Armageddon? Which obviously we don't believe. The three of us don't believe in this, but I mean, I'm using it metaphorically. I mean, the Armageddon being the attempt to bring forth Armageddon.
Now, I'm going to just, the bottom line is, we got 30 Democratic members of the House, including Pelosi and Jamie Raskin and Jared Huffman, sent a letter in on Friday to the DDIG wanting an investigation. Do you really think the Pentagon is going to do what they want? But even if they do, the bottom line is our clients, as I've mentioned many times today, view anybody working for Hegseth as, brown shirt, sycophants who will do it. They're not at all independent. The first thing Hegseth did when he came into the DOD was fire the 3 TJAGs, the 3 most senior lieutenant generals who were the heads of the Judge Advocacy. This had a huge message down to everybody. I was in the JAG Corps for 7 years in the Air Force. So do you think anyone's going to feel that the Fox is going to do an adequate investigation, a universally complete, fair, and accurate investigation of its own henhouse? No. So, I mean, what, we're going to have the Congressional Budget Office do it? What, are they going to have FEMA do it? I don't have an answer for that. Yeah, but at least even under the first Trump administration, as Larry remembers, we had a level of senior civilians that we could go to. But under Schedule F of Project 2025, they're gone. They're gone. The continuity is gone. It's a Christian nationalist entity, and every fourth week, they do the praise service, like I said, in the largest auditorium. Watch it on TV or attend, and it's right out of Gilead. It's right out of The Handmaid's Tale, and this is where we are. So I don't have an answer for who is the FBI going to fix it for us with Kash Patel or Pam Bondi? Who?
I have an answer.
I'd love to hear it.
The somnolent Congress wakes up and gets a majority together and impeaches the president of the United States successfully.
Larry, but my point is, if that happens and he's found guilty in the Senate, do you honestly believe he's going to leave?
Well, it'll bring it to a pass before it has to come to insurrection and a civil war.
That's my fear. You're right. That's my fear. And if we have a full-throated response in November and get both houses, and he'll be impeached again, and he's going to be tried. Maybe this time he's convicted. That is the flashpoint. Does he leave, or do we have civil war? That's what we're talking about tonight, aren't we?
I mean,
we're talking about when Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon. And when he crossed the Rubicon, he went despite the warnings in the Senate, and he was assassinated, and the war started. And at the end of those wars, Augustus was triumphant. And from then on out, Rome was ruled by emperors and was an empire and an imperial entity. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about our Rubicon. We're talking about our Civil War and the end of the Republic.
Well, that's a very scary thing to wrap on, although I can't imagine you have many things to be optimistic about. Last thing I want to ask is where people can find out. 2 questions. So, Mikey, where people can find out more about your organization, and then Lawrence, what is the effect this is going to have on China and Russia?
Simple for us. Just go to MRFF. It's like Mr. Firefighter, but it doesn't stand for that. It's Military Religious Freedom Foundation. Just go to MRFF misrepresenting.org. And, before this thing, we broke this story, we had hundreds of views every day. The other day, we had 70,282. So, it's out there.
Thousands. Okay, got it. Wow.
73,000, over 73,000 views on the website when we normally have hundreds.
Hundreds. Okay, I get it now. Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. Wow. And Lawrence, what about your analysis about how this is going to affect? This is going to affect, or is about China, and how it's going to affect Russia?
I think it has enormous potential for that, and there are a lot of directions it can go. Of course, Putin is looking at windfalls if oil goes to in excess of $100 a barrel. And I did an exercise in Beijing in 2009, very realistic exercise, and everyone was there. Marad was there, Lloyd's of London was there, AIG was there. Really thorough exercise. It went to 200. It went to 200 on the second day of the exercise. And all we did was take down Ras Tanura in Saudi Arabia, which had then about an 8 million barrel per day production capacity. We're talking about much more damage being done than that. But I don't think that's his principal concern right now, nor is it China's. They're both allied with Iran. And they're having councils right now, trying to figure out exactly what we mean, exactly what Trump is intent on doing. And it's very difficult. You read some of the things coming out of Beijing and some of the things coming out of Moscow now that pertain to this. They don't understand what's going on. They don't know what's going on. They can see what's happening, but they don't know how it's going to turn out. And they don't know how far we're going to go and what we're going to do. And they don't know what Netanyahu's going to do. And so they're very concerned. Would they enter this thing if it became a serious threat to them? Yes, probably. Would they have the means to do so? Just look at their submarine fleet. They could sink everything in the North Arabian Sea on the surface within about 96 hours before we even knew anything was really happening. That is the best water on Earth to operate in a submarine. Passive and active sonar are not very effective if you get in a convergence zone, you get in a salinity level, you get at a temperature level, all of which exist in the North Arabian Sea, and you can hide very well. So they could bring our ships down without us even probably knowing why they were sunk or how they were sunk. This is fraught with all kinds of problems, but I think they're more sensible than we are. I think they will wait until the very moment when it seems like everything is coming apart before they do anything.
Larry, can I ask you, what about Kim Jong-un and North Korea in this scenario?
Well, it's another unknown factor. He's an ally of Putin now, and he's a very solid ally. You may have seen the meeting they had recently. They shook hands, signed documents and everything. That's where Putin is getting some of his weaponry for Ukraine. And I have no doubt that Kim Jong-un, I have no doubt that Pakistan, father of the Islamic bomb, was a Pakistani, A.Q. Khan. I have no doubt that they might give an atomic bomb to Saudi Arabia or to Iran or both.
Well, I was going to have dinner, but I have no appetite left.
Yeah, sorry. It's a good, Well, and so, but is Iran going to win this, or is Iran going to win this and then Israel will use the nuke?
No winner. There is no winner of this conflict. Doesn't matter what the resolution is, unless it's tomorrow morning and we still got a lot of dead civilians. And look at Gaza, look at Lebanon, look at what's happening to Lebanon right now. I mean, it's a disaster.
Yeah, no one's covering it. Okay, well, the one thing that gives me hope is that their voice is out the hair like yours. So that's the silver lining.
And yours.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having this on here.
And the guest you're having later.
Oh, yes. Thank you for coming back on. Open invitation. And I like that I'm commiserating. I like that your dogs were commiserating with us about the state of the world. So,
Larry, thank you for getting me on this one today. Larry's one of our best, if not the best, advisory board member. We have some really great ones. And anyone that's watching this, I just wanted to say, please do something to resist. Look at the people of Minneapolis. Do something, say something. And if you really have two choices, either you resist some way or you collaborate. And I want to make it clear that if you decide to do neither, you are collaborating.
And next time I have you on, I definitely have to do how did you go from being a Reagan lawyer to someone calling for resistance? So that's for the next show.
Okay.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you,
guys so
everybody.
much. Thank you both so
Thank
much.
you. See you, Mikey.
That was wonderful. And we are just going to keep the show going. If you haven't already liked the stream, please do give it a thumbs up. We want to make sure people hear these stories, this analysis. It's not about being insecure and wanting to feel liked. It's about the algorithm. So we are going to move forward with our next show. And again, to see this full show, if you're watching live, you're so in luck. You get to see the full show. If you're watching later and you want to see the full show, please do go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Bringing on to the show some fabulous guests. Again, we have a mixed panel where we have a return guest and we have a new guest. So joining us right now is Jamal Abdi from NIAC and Rami Khouri, Distinguished Fellow at American University of Beirut and non-resident Senior Fellow at Arab Center, Washington, D.C. Welcome, Rami and Jamal.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. So I wanted to start off by asking you, well, first you, Jamal, what is your connection to Iran? Your kind of like personal, familial connection. And then I want to ask you what both of you think is missing from the analysis and discussion about what's happening right now.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Katie. So I'm half Iranian. I'm Iranian on my father's side. He came to the United States, like many Iranian Americans. He came as a student shortly before the revolution. He actually went back one time right before the revolution, like a year after he came here, and then actually did not go back for, 30 years or something like that. And so, I'm a little bit estranged from Iran because I really, I have not visited. By the time my family was sort of comfortable with going, I was working in Congress. Now I'm working at NIAC, where, we report on human rights abuses and things like that. So part of what motivates me for this work is that, I want to be able to freely and safely visit the country of my heritage and to be able to bring my son and go with my father and, see family members that I've never had a chance to visit and see all the amazing country that hopefully will still be there after Trump is done. What's missing from the mainstream conversation, I think anybody who is just watching cable news is probably under the impression that every single Iranian is just pleading with Donald Trump to drop bombs on them. Every Iranian in the diaspora, every Iranian American favors this war, and that the only Iranian American voices we have are the likes of Masih Alinejad or Reza Pahlavi or other people who aspire to go rule Iran. And that's, I think, clearly very, very damaging, and is part of the reason that we got into this situation in the first place. A big part of how it was sold, although they didn't do much to try to sell it to the American public, but big part of how they have tried to justify this illegal war.
And Rami, what about you and your relationship to obviously you studied you analyzed the Middle East, but you are of Palestinian descent. You spent time in Lebanon. And what is your kind of connection to this area? And how do you think that the mainstream Western media is misrepresenting reality?
Well, my father came to the U.S. as a journalist in 1947 from Palestine. We're from Nazareth. And I enjoyed the Christian fundamentalist show because I often try to debate with Christian fundamentalists, and I tell them my name is Khouri, which means priest. And we have that family name because the great-great-grandfather in 1780s rebuilt in Nazareth the Byzantine church that has in it a water well called Mary's Well, where Mary used to go and bring water to Jesus and her family. So I kind of feel a direct link to Jesus.
Wow. Yeah.
And the first Christian churches, the Orthodox.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wait, but I thought Israel and Palestine, they were fighting because of an ancient animosity and inherent millennia-old hatred between Jews and Muslims. That's me being sarcasm alert. Yeah.
what the media here tells you. But anyway, my father came in 47 to cover the partition debate at the UN about what to do about the mess in Palestine that the British created. And the UN voted to partition Palestine. And then he couldn't go back because after Israel was created, they wouldn't allow Palestinians back. So I was born in New York in 1948. So I spent my whole life with my family when I was younger. My dad was with the UN all his adult life. And we lived in the US, we lived in Lebanon, we lived in Geneva, where I finished high school. We lived in Baghdad. So I lived all over the place. And then I came to the US in 1966 for college in upstate New York. And so since that, the last 60 years, I've been involved in covering the Middle East, analyzing the Middle East, and interacting with people, Israelis, American Jews, both progressive and non-progressive, all the different denominations and activists, whatever. So I've spent 60 years now doing this and searching diligently for that middle ground where we could resolve the Arab-Israeli conflict equitably for both sides. Now we have a much, much more difficult, dangerous situation across the whole region with the war, and it all goes back to the Palestine issue. The Palestine issue is the core stimulus that created the Iranian-Israeli animosity. Before, under the Shah, Iran was very close to Israel, sending it oil and stuff. But in modern times, the Iranians and the Israelis haven't gotten along because of what the Israelis were doing in Palestine, the colonial expansion. And that's how Hezbollah started in southern Lebanon to protect southern Lebanon from Israeli attacks. I remember in the 60s, the Israeli attacks in Lebanon when I was there. And the Lebanese army was not allowed to become strong enough by the Western powers, not allowed to get strong enough to defend itself because they didn't want it to threaten Israel. So Hezbollah was created, and then Hamas was created because the Palestinian Authority wasn't doing anything. And all of these tensions, you can track them back to the Palestine issue. And the Israelis now are very strong. They have the U.S. support, and they want to clobber or destroy anybody in the region, Arab, Iranian, maybe Turks in the future, maybe others. They want to destroy anybody who dares to challenge Israel or to resist it. So that's kind of my life story, to analyze this, write about it, but also try to find an opening for a peaceful resolution.
Right. Well, what can you guys tell us about the new leader in Iran, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of obviously the recently assassinated leader? He is now the supreme leader, and this choice, one that Trump is not happy with, is an interesting one. Not that surprising, though. So what are your thoughts on this, and what do we need to know about him?
Well, Mojtaba Khamenei, I mean, first of all, this leadership transition is something that people have been talking about for years and years. And there's sort of this trope that, every couple of years, somebody puts out the information that Khamenei has died. And now there's a search for a new leader, and it's always fake. But this is something that I think anybody paying attention to Iran, anybody working on Iran policy or anything like that, is very aware of. That Khamenei was, not going to live forever, and there was this transition. And I think for, when there was the JCPOA, the Iran deal, part of the motivation was that, eventually Iran was going to go through this transition, and you wanted to have people who were in favor of diplomacy and moderation and human rights inside the country and things like that. And so the hope was that Iran would become, a quote unquote normal country, not under these massive sanctions. And so you could actually see a transition to potentially a different structure, or potentially a leader who plays more of a backseat role and ushers the country into a different direction. Instead, Khamenei was killed by American bombs dropped by Israel, and the ascension of his son is something that I don't think was discussed, but it was a very unrealistic prospect for a lot of people. First and foremost, the Islamic Republic was established in a revolution to reject a monarchy, a hereditary form of government. So this has been something that even the elder Khamenei kind of supposedly bristled at, the notion that there would be this hereditary transfer of power, because that really changes the nature of what they sought to establish. Beyond that, he is somebody who we know very little about. He is somebody who's very active behind the scenes, was one of his father's closest advisors, very close with the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And so he's viewed as a hardliner. But very few people have heard his voice. And even since he has been announced as the leader, we haven't seen or heard from him. And there's a lot of speculation that he was injured in one of these strikes, and we don't even know what sort of his status is. So I just think this is a very interesting moment, because you'll have people like Trump and people who back this war saying, well, isn't it great? We got rid of Khamenei. And it's like, well, we replaced him with Khamenei. And this was probably the worst circumstances for this transition to happen. One in which the country is at war, the leader was killed, they're installing his son, who his wife was killed, his mother was killed, his father was killed. So this is probably the worst possible way that this could have happened. But all that being said, I don't want to make any judgments, because we know so little about Mojtaba Khamenei, and we also know very little about the process and the dynamics that were in play when this election was announced. At least, verifiable information. We have a lot of speculation.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I mean, this is also something, I know that you're saying it's hard to speculate, but it is ironic, because haven't we seen this before, where Israel takes out a leader, and the leader is replaced by someone who is much more of a hardliner than the leader who they killed? Rami, do you want to take that one, or either one? But
I think I'm muted.
Okay, now you're unmuted.
Yeah. So I just add to what Jamal said a couple of things. That the selection of Mojtaba is fascinating, because for me it kind of captures all the key things that anybody would need to know about Iran and how it's run. The fact that it was a selection that was an act of resistance and defiance and provocation to the Americans, saying, well, you wanted to get rid of the father? Well, here's another one who's even more radical. I think people say we don't know much about him, as Jamal said. But also that he represents, his selection represents a continuity, even in the middle of a war. The council that chose him was able to meet digitally or in person, I'm not sure, and they selected him. And then there was huge crowds that came out supporting him, even though there's many others in Iran who don't like the system. But still, the continuity of the Iranian governance power structure with the interlocking interests that have to constantly negotiate and find a middle ground, the business community, the judiciary, the clerics, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, the bureaucracy, the army, they all have to constantly negotiate, and then they reach a decision, and the supreme leader makes the final decision. All of that is really a sign to anybody who's looking or is watching that this is a very well-entrenched system. It's not something that disappears when you knock off the top person. So I think that's the main thing that strikes me about this selection. Where he goes is going to depend on the conditions that come out of the current conflict. And this is not something that's going to be evident very quickly. They might, the US might say in a few days, well, okay, we've achieved our goals, mission accomplished, we stop the attack. the Israelis may not stop the attack, and the Iranians may not stop their attacks, because the whole nature of the strategy that Iran has implemented is one that was devised months and months ago, or some of it years ago. They were expecting this. This was the least surprising war in the history of warfare, I guess. And they were planning every stage of the retaliation, and the way they decentralized the military system and the political system and resources, everything. And therefore, it just continued without any problem and achieved quite a few successes, apparently, especially in knocking out the defensive radars of the Israelis and the Americans and others. And that's why the missiles in the last couple of days from the rockets and the drones from Iran are getting through and knocking out more things. So we'll see what comes. But all of this was planned, was pre-planned. This is a very impressive organizational animal. Whether you like their ideology or not, you have to be impressed by what they did to withstand the second war they've been subjected to in 9 months, and then to keep going. And now they're very defined, because their aim is not to get a ceasefire or just to survive. Their aim is to change the whole geopolitical configuration of the Gulf and the wider Middle East, West Asia. They want to get the Americans out of the Gulf and out of the whole region if they can. It's difficult, but so their aims are much bigger than just repelling the assault. And it's going to take time to figure this out. But this is one of the most impressive examples of defiance and action and resistance and responding to the aggressions against it through a mechanism that doesn't just look at military power, but looks at economic pressures, political pressures, hitting the civilian targets all over the Middle East, industrial targets, oil, gas. This is controversial, and people are going to just debate this for a long time. But what the Iranians are doing is probably, I'm thinking, maybe the first real example of successful defiance by a Middle Eastern power against Western colonial interests, which Israel and the U.S. represent today in a big way. It's really very significant. And the question of whether the Iranians are good guys or bad guys, or the system, the regime, people can discuss that all they want. I just look at the results, and this is what I see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it seems like hopefully, I mean, the propaganda of Western pundits and think tanks in declaring that Iran is weak, it would be more transparently false if the media were doing a good job. But I do still think that it's going to be eroded a little bit, just given the facts on the ground. Now, again, the media is going to cover this up. But what are your thoughts on the way that Western media, Western pundits, think tanks, diaspora organizations create a perception that does not necessarily correlate with reality about Iran being, 2 weeks? Well, obviously, there's a week away from a nuclear bomb, and then also at the same time, kind of contradictorily, in a contradictory way, they are weak and on their knees.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think actually the erosion of the nuclear threat is part of the reason that the United States decided to go into this war. And what I mean by that is, I think that after the Obama era deal, there was this desensitization to the prospect of a nuclear Iran. Now, after hearing this repeated over and over at that point for 2 decades, that was 2015, 2 decades that Iran was on the brink of a nuclear weapon, of course, people their eyes glaze over a little bit. Okay, we've heard this before. But also the fact that the biggest hawks in Washington, who were making it seem like all they wanted was Iran to, curtail its nuclear program, and that was existential, not just to Israel, but existential to the United States, existential to, the entire world. And when they got the deal, suddenly they moved on to different things. Suddenly nuclear actually wasn't that big of a deal. And it was actually the ballistic missiles. It was actually the proxies. And so Donald Trump ripped up the deal. And there were not a lot of people who had been agitating for the deal and the sanctions to get the deal in the first place who were suddenly saying, oh, this is bad because Iran is going to rebuild its program. And I think the nuclear program was Iran's leverage in these negotiations. And I think that leverage really dissipated in how much both the public and leaders like Donald Trump actually viewed it. And Netanyahu didn't care about it. I mean, he cares about it somewhat, but he has another agenda. He's more threatened by the U.S. and Iran having a relationship, having peace in the region to enable the U.S. to actually leave the region, things like that. That's what he cares about. So, I think the way this gets covered is, especially in the lead up to this war, I think there was a lot of sloppy coverage talking about Iran's nuclear weapon program. I think most Americans probably are under the impression that Iran has nuclear weapons, or at least has an active program. And it should be repeated over and over that the United States, since the mid-2000s, has been saying Iran does not have that program. But I think these are just sort of basic things that I think are not covered by the media. And then the fact that the nuclear program has sort of dissipated as being this big threat that could be leveraged, and the fact that there were these military exchanges between Iran and Israel, and then Iran and the US and Israel. I think the war last year was also reported in a way that made it seem like Iran was completely defeated, when the reality is that Iran actually increasingly had success in bypassing the interceptors to get missiles into Israel, especially towards the end of that war. And there was a lot of criticism inside of Iran among decision makers that Iran shouldn't have accepted the ceasefire because they were finally in a position to start winning, and the U.S. and Israel's ability to defend itself had really been somewhat dismantled. So I don't think any of these things are known by the average consumer of the news, and that then puts us in this position where the memory of Iraq has faded. The memory of what regime change wars and what war itself actually looks like has completely faded from the memory of the media and most people, and so we find ourselves stumbling into an even dumber war than the one that has haunted us for the past 2 decades in Iraq.
Right. Well, I think that's a very astute analysis, and it's very scary how much history repeats itself. Rami, what's your response to that?
Well, I agree with all that. I would add some things to it as well. The Gaza genocide clarified more than ever before the role of the mainstream Western media, most of the Western media, mainstream in Europe and North America, as being complicit in the genocide. Their inability to analyze events dispassionately and accurately, and instead repeat the cliches of the US government, which repeated the talking points that the Israelis passed on to them, was stunning. It was more stunning than ever before. And I've followed this, like I told you, for 60 years, for various reasons. But this is the dying throes of a mainstream media industry that is losing credibility steadily, and the majority of younger people in the U.S. of all ethnicities, religions, groups, whatever, genders, the younger people are not following the mainstream media. They're going to social media and to progressive media like you and others. But the lack of analysis, accurate analysis of Middle Eastern societies, whether it's Palestine or Lebanon or Iran, which are the 3 big ones now. Syria before was also a big one, as was Iraq. But the lack of the media's analysis, I think, mirrors the lack of analysis by the government offices in the U.S. For the main part, there are some really excellent officials in the State Department, Defense Department, but they don't make the policy. The policymakers have generally not understood these societies and have been able to spread this propaganda about them, these cliches that they're all evil. And if you go back over the last, I would say, 75 years, there's always a bad guy central in the Middle East. I mean, way back it was the communists in the 50s and 60s. Then it was Jamal Abdi Nasser. Then it was the PLO and Arafat. Then it was Gaddafi. Then it was Iraq. Then it was ISIS. Now it's Iran. And in the middle, there was the Islamic fundamentalists. And then now it's Iran. There's always a bad guy that permeates the whole region. And people don't analyze the humanity of this region, the people, their identity. You know, one point I often make is that the reason people resist, and if you look carefully, you'll see over the last 75 years, since around 1950, Iran and Palestine are the two places where Israel and the Western powers have not allowed the people to practice self-determination, that they've intruded, they've intervened, they've done coups, they've done assaults, to prevent them from running their own systems peacefully. And the two places where the greatest amount of resistance to Israel and the US has happened are Iran and Palestine, and that's not by accident. So this resistance is a really central issue. And the Iranians, I think now for the first time, are being able to translate that popular sentiment into a military strategy, a political strategy, whatever, technological strategy. We'll see. It hasn't completed yet. We'll see what happens down the road. But the point I make often, the example I give is people in the West, broadly speaking, and the media certainly, don't understand why people resist. They don't understand the nature of the relationship, the link, the organic link between individuals and their land, whether it's their country, their region, their religion, their whatever. And the best example of this is that people all over the region, in Iran and in Palestine and Lebanon, family names are named after cities. So you have the names of families that follow a city's name, like Nabulsi in Palestine, or Beiruti in Lebanon, or Homsi in Syria, or Isfahani in Iran. The family name is the name of where they come from. That link is so powerful, and this is not understood. So the humanity of our region and the identity of our region is not appreciated, and therefore the Western powers see us as simple pieces on a chessboard. And this is the result over and over and over again. They keep doing the same mistake. So let's hope this is a moment where the West and its allies pay a price so severe that they'll stop doing this.
That would be amazing. I will say that one thing, I think that in the grouping that you gave, to me, ISIS is different from the other ones. So you mentioned, I think, Hezbollah, the PLO, Gaddafi, just because I think that they are, I think that the non-ISIS examples you gave are much more reasonable, not actually a threat. And I think ISIS was. Not that the West responded appropriately, and we actually know that, they helped prop up ISIS. But I think the vilification, I mean, what's so scary is that if you just watch corporate media, you really think that Israel tries not to, I mean, maybe it's too much of it's too undermined by reality, but the media will never accuse Israel of targeting civilians, right? They will push back on that. And if you heard mainstream media, you would think that the Iranian government, and again, people can have their own ideas about the Iranian government, but what's clear is that they're targeting civilians. I think I said this in the earlier half of the show, but I mean, it pales in comparison. I mean, they obviously try not to kill civilians, and it's like a total inversion of reality. It's not just an exaggeration. It's just the exact opposite, the way the media reports on it. And it's so infuriating and irresponsible. And sometimes it's because they're true believers, not like religious true believers. Well, in some cases they are, but I mean more politically true believers. And sometimes they know that they're being full of it. And that's always a depressing game. But, speaking of Western media's malpractice, I want to show a clip of Jake Tapper of CNN. Jake Tapper decided to bring on a very appropriate guest to speak for the Iranian people. I'm not kidding. You're not going to believe who he brought on. He brought on, I guess she's in Tehran. She's on the ground in Iran. He brought on someone named Emily Schrader. So let's take a look at who Emily Schrader is. Brad, we have some tweets from her. Okay, so this is the type of comments she makes. She identifies as an Israeli American journalist. Too bad Palestine has never been a country and the Palestinian Arabs are colonizers. Okay, that's one tweet from her. This is exciting. This is from 2025. Big announcement. As Iran approaches 2 weeks of a complete communications blackout, it doesn't have to remain this way. I'm thrilled to announce I'm part of a historic, highly confidential alliance of Israeli tech veterans and Iranian underground operatives. Together, we are building the digital and financial infrastructure for a G7 nation before the regime falls, starting with 2 stealth ventures that simultaneously sever the dictatorship's 2 main chokeholds, connectivity and capital. Now we want you to be involved. If you're an angel investor who wants to take part in this opportunity, fill out this form or shoot me a message and let's discuss more about these game-changing ventures. Okay, now let's take a look again, just so we have a sense of who Emily Schrader is. Let's take a look at a clip of her on Piers Morgan.
We've been talking to Iranians on the ground.
Yeah, Piers Morgan. Sorry, Brad, the other one first. Yeah.
There's a few things I want to address, and obviously I appreciate that you pointed out the fact that Hezbollah did attack Israel before Israel had ever responded. There's a lot of activity from the anti-Israel movements. Even they were protesting against Israel before Israel had responded. By the end of October 7th in the United States, there were anti-Israel protests. So there's something inherently wrong here because Israel hadn't even responded. So it's not actually about that. It's about supporting terrorism. Now, when it comes to the responsibility to protect, we have to remember that Hezbollah is not a state actor. Hezbollah is a terror proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. It is occupying and colonizing parts of the Middle East, including some parts of Syria even. And of course, we have other terror proxies in Yemen, in Iraq, in all kinds of other places that are being orchestrated by the Islamic Republic of Iran. And, to Rama's point about occupation, there are occupations, military occupations, many of which are legal, some of which are illegal, all over the world.
She's speaking of Rahma Zen, friend of show, who's right next to her on in that image.
And we don't see the people who are occupied carrying out the same savage acts of barbarism that we saw a year ago today. We don't see families being slaughtered, women being raped, tied to trees and raped and sexually mutilated the same way that we saw.
Okay, so again, so you can get a sense of this person. So obviously, Jake Tapper, there he is, poor guy. He's trying to get a guest to tell us about what is happening in Iran. And he thinks that Emily Schrader is appropriate. So let's hear what Emily Schrader had to say.
We've been talking to Iranians on the ground about the strikes and about Iranian leadership going forward. How do the Iranians you're talking to, how do they see the future unfolding in Iran?
Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of problems with the internet still being shut off, although there is some limited use with Starlink and limited other options. But by and large, the responses from Iranians that I've spoken to has been overwhelmingly in favor of the United States and Israeli action on the ground. They're very happy that regime targets, many of them, the centers of suppression of the Iranian people. Many of these besieged IRGC bases and forces are in fact being targeted. So they're happy about that. The main complaint that I'm hearing right now on the ground is that they're personally witnessing IRGC troops moving into schools and mosques. I've received a plethora of photos from Iranians on the ground of exactly that, moving both the force, the manpower, and weapons and equipment into school areas. So this is something very concerning. It's not new. It is a tactic of the Islamic regime and their proxy forces, but it's definitely concerning for the future. And of course, there is some questioning about what President Trump does intend for the leadership. The united call from the Iranian people on the ground is that they want the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi to lead a transition government. After that, go to a national referendum where they will choose the system of government. But it's not clear yet where Trump stands on that issue. And we heard it in his press conference as well. He prefers someone inside. The problem is it isn't Venezuela. It's not the same system. And you have to deconstruct that system, the IRGC, in order to have genuine change and stability.
And no surprise there. Guess who did not push back on a single claim that she made? That would be Jake Tapper. I mean, again, just the casting in itself, deciding to go with this person. What do the Iranian people think, Emily Schrader, is mind-boggling. I mean, it's such an insult to people's intelligence, and it's so dehumanizing. And imagine if someone who was like the Iranian equivalent of Emily Schrader were invited onto a show to assess, I don't know, what the people of Israel are thinking. So what are your guys' responses to this?
Well, if I can start by mentioning it's the fact that she's Israeli, American, Iranian, or whatever she's things is fascinating. But this is she should be as a case study for books on Israeli propaganda and American complicity. And you know, when you ask yourself why does somebody like CNN do this on the mainstream media, it's because they make a lot of money out of it with advertising and support and donations, and they have access to people. And the other other side, the people who appear, take advantage of this, and they make a lot of money too, and they have a lot of followers and whatever. But the thing about this system is it's not working anymore as it used to. The Israelis, the Zionists, and then the Israeli government for 100 years succeeded in fooling the Western public, the first the British, then the American. They succeeded in getting the state the land was 93% Palestinian Arab in 1917, became the state of Israel. But it's no longer working because the vast majority of Americans are no longer automatically buying these arguments. They're no longer watching, most of them, the mainstream media. They're getting their news from other sources, and they've seen on TV and on their phones the live genocide from Gaza, which the U.S. was directly complicit in. So when I run into people like her all the time, and they start making these accusations or statements, I say, let's go and have a half-hour televised discussion, you and I, quietly. They won't do it. They won't. They don't want to discuss. They don't want to reveal facts. They don't want to look at historical drivers. They just want to make cliche statements and go on to the next one. So I wouldn't worry too much about them. But the fact that they're still appearing is a problem of the lingering imbalances and immorality, even, I would say, and unprofessionalism.
Yeah. And Jake Tapper should be absolutely ashamed. And I just want to point out that Jake Tapper never corrected, debunked reporting he did about alleged rape on October 7th and the alleged mass rape campaign. And what makes that even more despicable, in my opinion, is it's one thing if, I mean, it's not professional or acceptable, but it's one thing if he's embarrassed, he doesn't want to admit it. He doesn't even have the decency to pretend to care when sexual assault and rape victims are Palestinian, because what do we know? We know that it was documented on video and Israeli media that there were rapes of Palestinians. There were protests in support of said rape. There was a Knesset member who defended it, said it was legitimate, and a rabbi who blessed it. And CNN couldn't find any space in its programming to report on this. So, I mean, their bias is so repulsive. And I think with Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, they actually are true believers. I don't mean religious. I mean, I just think they're actually Zionists. So I'm sure there's money involved, but they are so shameful. And I just want to say, as a Jew, I don't feel safe having those people being the faces of Jews, people who are basically genocide apologists and rape deniers. So that just a little, piece of advice for people who constantly complain about or talk about Jewish safety, and that's a whole other discussion. But Jamal, how much does this represent the Iranian monolith, which is huge, right? You can't speak no single person, but I mean, couldn't they at least try to get a diaspora monarchist or something in there? Wouldn't that have been less insulting than this?
No, because this person has talked to all 90 million Iranians and knows exactly what they want. And to be clear, I mean, she's not inside of Iran. She's not Iranian. But, I first learned of this person.
She was just talking to Iranians on the ground not from. Okay, got it. I think I gave her too much credit that she actually was there. No, okay. But she's definitely not Iranian, but yeah, okay. Right.
Yeah.
I was wondering, she doesn't have the bravery to be there, yeah.
No, I mean, she talked to some people on the phone, maybe. But I first learned of her in 2022 during the protests inside of Iran, the Women Life Freedom Movement, when she came after us. She came after NIAC and was part of this massive operation to attack any Iranian American who was favorable of diplomacy or who opposed war. I mean, there is, this is one war propagandist that is part of a machine that I know you've covered on your show, Katie, but they practice this art of, I don't know what the term is, but it's projection. It's,
Yes.
She attacks with her biggest vulnerability.
With what?
Every attack is an admission, right?
What is it? Every accusation is a confession. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A confession. Yeah. So she attacks us. We are somehow working for the Islamic Republic, Khamenei signing our checks, and we're here in Washington D.C. and we're operating freely as an agent. Meanwhile, she operates a firm with her husband, a propaganda firm.
No, they can't be married because he's not Jewish. Her boyfriend, who's I believe a Palestinian citizen of Israel, he was in the IDF. Unfortunately, of course, they can't get married because he's not Jewish. So they're always like, they're delaying. Their wedding got delayed by October 7th. What they have to do is, because this is such a tolerant country, they do let you go out to another country, get married. So you get married in like Rome or Cyprus, ironically. Then you go back to Israel. Anyway, sorry, keep going. But they can't get married yet.
That's, well,
can't make that up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's really, good for her. She's become kind of the figurehead of this dying propaganda operation that nobody is buying anymore. And but there are people who do fall for this. And sadly, look, she and others prey on Iranians and the Iranian diaspora. And Iranians are suffering under repression and massive sanctions. They have been impoverished by sanctions. That was by design. That is what the people who were supporting the sanctions, that what Netanyahu was saying when he got Obama and Trump and Biden to impose these sanctions, is that we're going to starve them. And we're going to starve them so that they turn out in the streets. And this way, they're not going to have a middle class. They're not going to have civil society. So they're not going to be actually able to organize a democratic transition or really be able to stand up. Instead, they're going to go out to the streets defenseless, like a food riot, and get mowed down. And then that'll give us the opportunity to sweep in and finally destroy the country. I don't even think they want to change the regime. They just want to destroy the country. And sadly, there are Iranians who are desperate, who are, feel like there's no future for them. And they hear this person, or lots of people in the diaspora, especially people who recently left Iran, they hear this person making these promises. And it rhymes with what Reza Pahlavi is doing, making these promises, making these accusations. There's nobody in the United States who supports peace. They're all regime agents. They're all Hamas. Right. Nobody could be opposed to what is happening. But they prey on these people, and then those people end up being their foot soldiers. Those end up being the people who amplify the propaganda. And so you need some propagandists, you need some bots, you need some coordinated campaigns, but then you prey on an entire population and turn them against themselves. And that is what has happened. It's like a disease, you turn your own body's defense mechanisms against itself to destroy itself. And that is what is happening. And she is a key kind of but one player in this operation, but one who has risen to fame, I guess, because she is just so good at lying to you and staring you in the face while she lies.
Yeah, well, we actually have, let me unmute you, Rami. Sorry. Okay, say that again. Yeah, of course.
I thought that it's also part of the bigger context in which Trump and people like
Hegseth, as Mikey calls him, Hegseth, like Kegs.
People like that come, and Huckabee, and how these people become prominent because they're fundamentally entertainers. Mm-hmm. And Trump made his name in the entertainment business in a false make-believe world that entertains, shocks, titillates, it does all kinds of things. And this is part of it. You see this all the time. There's people like this in Lebanon and Palestine who will, go completely against the public opinion, vast majority, and say something like, "Oh, we should immediately make a peace agreement with the Israelis and benefit from their technological know-how or whatever." So this is a human nature. Human beings, when they're weak and they're defeated sometimes they become prey to these kind of overtures. But the fact that Trump, similarly like her, often says things that are not true. They're just lies or they're exaggerations, but they're captivating. And then this is how they make their name.
Yeah, it is really disgusting. I want to actually give you a chance. I mean, not because I take it seriously, but because it's actually quite amusing. Let's see, Brad, what is that article that you have prepared? Is that something? I don't remember. Let's see. I want to show this article, which I don't think I shared it with you because I was just sent it. But I'll try not to laugh. I'm going to show this, and hopefully, okay. This is by Emily. How I became a target of the Islamic Republic of Iran. As a feminist and Israeli and American and a journalist, I am the epitome of everything the Islamic Republic despises and wants to destroy. Ynet News correspondent describes her personal experience. For the past decade, I've covered authoritarian regimes like China, Russia, and Iran as both a journalist and an activist on my own social media platforms, in particular as it pertains to women's rights, which is why I'm sure she said nothing about the bombing of the school that killed over 150 girls between the ages of 7 and 12. Okay, so
she did say something.
Oh, what did she say?
You know, it was by an RGC base.
Oh, right, exactly.
They're moving missiles into the schools. The same.
Oh, right, exactly.
The same thing they've been saying for the past 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Here she is, very persuasively holding an Iranian flag. Looks very authentic. And then here it is where she talked about you and Trita Parsi. Okay. Since then, I've spoken out through social media to both the West and the people of Iran about what was happening on the ground, from strikes to military threats to executions to foreign lobbying mouthpieces of the Islamic Republic, such as the National Iranian American Council, NIAC, and the cowardice of the West in facing the reality of what the Islamic Republic really is. When I exposed the organization whose activists and leaders such as Trita Parsi and Jamal Abdi have parroted the same talking points as the Islamic Republic itself for years in their policy positions, my video received millions of views. Then the online smear campaign began, and I began to receive death threats. Not only did Parsi, Abdi, and other NIAC affiliates immediately jump on the anti-Semitic bandwagon, insinuating conspiracy theories that I am acting on behalf of the Jewish state, but I also received hundreds of messages from inauthentic accounts with the flag of the Islamic Republic or photos of regime officials pledging to destroy Israel, bomb my house in Tel Aviv, as well as a variety of sexual threats. Okay. By the way, the fact that she claims it's a conspiracy theory for anyone to point out that she works for the Jewish state, which I'm sure you did not. I don't even know if you pointed that out or Trita Parsi did. I'm sure anyone in our circle who pointed that out said Israel. This is a woman who just advertised on Twitter that she's doing some basically like a spy operation and told people how they could get in touch with her. And yet it's anti-Semitic for anyone to bring out her obvious connection and projection to the Israeli government, which she is not at all critical. Meanwhile, NIAC, sorry, I don't mean to raise my voice, but meanwhile, NIAC, you guys are, you don't like foreign coordinated regime change, but you're very critical of the Iranian government, whereas she has never criticized the Israeli government.
Right. And just look at that inversion. You know, we're not allowed to criticize her because that is anti-Semitic. But then she's allowed to say whatever nasty things about us because we are just Iranian. And so you can say we have dual loyalties and that if we have any opinion, of course, we're just parrots of the regime. We don't genuinely not want Iran to be bombed. We don't genuinely not want the United States to starve people thousands of miles away. This is all, you know, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so illogical. The idea that like only someone who is in cahoots with the Iranian government would not be sadists is basically what she's saying. And again, she's probably projecting because she is a sadist. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that article came out, I believe it came out after we had commissioned a study on what was going on online. Why were all these attacks coming through and revealing this inauthentic campaign? And so she just takes what she's involved with and turns it against us.
What was it? It was who did that? I've shown it, but we can show it again. I believe when Eton was on.
Social Forensics has a report on the online attacks against us. And then there have been subsequent Haaretz, Citizen Lab
that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. Have come out with these reports about the other inauthentic activities that are happening to promote Reza Pahlavi, to promote regime change, and it's funded by, dare I say, the Israeli government.
Yeah,
I don't.
It's really anti-Semitic.
Literally funded by
that. How dare you? Why are you picking on Israel? That's one of my favorite arguments. Yeah. And what Rami, what do you have to say to this kind of, I mean, Hasbara propaganda?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that this is a critical moment for the Zionist/Israeli government approach to propagating a whole range of views aimed at the Western world, mostly at ignorant Westerners who don't know the Middle East, and they just have cliches about it. They've been doing this very successfully for about a century, since around 1915. But in the last 20 years or 20 years, they've stumbled, and they're now in slight desperation mode. And that's why you've had this massive movement to counter anti-Semitism, which should be countered because anti-Semitism is a criminal, terrible thing. But the anti-Semitism that they're trying to counter, they do it by putting definitions of anti-Semitism that make it a crime to criticize the state of Israel or Israeli policy. So if you talk about West Bank settlements as being illegal, that's criminal, and you can go to jail for that or be fined. So this is a desperate move by the Israelis and the Zionists and their supporters in the West. They're trying all kinds of mechanisms to revive the support that they've lost in the West, even in some of the political establishment. They still have a big hold or a big influence on Congress and the presidency, but even that is loosening a little bit. So the world is changing. Their lies, their hoax, their exaggeration, all the techniques they used. I wrote an article recently classifying the 12 different techniques that Zionist movements and the state of Israel have used historically with the West. And they just flat out lie. They make exaggerations. They change the subject. They talk about Sudan and other places. Yeah. So this is it's so obvious now, and this is part of it. I don't think we should be too worried about it. As long as the activists for justice for all, equal justice for all, which must be the baseline of everything that you and I and all of us do, equal justice for all will prevail because the majority of Americans want that if they are offered it. They haven't been offered it. They've been offered only a menu that Israel is righteous and humane, and God wants them to have their state, and the Palestinians and the Iranians and Hezbollah are evildoers, and they should be gotten rid of. And this is not a situation that can last very long. So I'm not too worried. What's fascinating today is that every single anti-Palestinian action by the Israel lobby, whether it's to criminalize speech, prohibit a meeting, make BDS sanctions or boycotts illegal, every single move that is made to silence Palestinians or criminalize them is immediately met by a counter wave of legal cases, public protests, meetings, conferences, media activism. So they're no longer operating in a blank field where they can control the narrative as they have from 1915 until about 10 years ago. And this is a heartening sign. The big problem for us Palestinians is that we don't have a government. There's no government that can represent the Palestinians, which is exactly what the Israelis wanted to achieve. And now Trump with this Board of Peace and this commercial carpetbagging colonial stuff is going to perpetuate this to prevent a real, genuine political movement that represents all Palestinians. That's one of the reasons Hamas became prominent, is not just because it did military resistance against Israeli occupation. It's because Hamas represented in the last 15, 20 years the legitimate middle ground of Palestinian national identity and political aspirations. That their position was one that the vast majority of Palestinians accepted, to end the occupation, have self-determination, have statehood. and deal with the refugee issue legally. This is what the Palestinians want, and that includes living peacefully with a Jewish majority state of Israel. But the Israelis don't want any of that, and therefore they've kept the Palestinians in this terrible situation, one consequence of which has been that we have no government, and there's no focal point to lead the Palestinian resistance. I don't know how this is going to evolve, but it will evolve soon because it's not tenable in the long run.
Yeah, and it is really disturbing. And do you think Israel's going to use a nuclear weapon? I was asking the first panel that also, but how do you guys see? What's your prediction on how this is going to end?
Go ahead, Jamal.
Again, it's an inversion. The nation that claims not to have a nuclear bomb is the one that has it, and the nation that people accuse of having one doesn't. And one thing, actually, let me just add, because and I'm going to add this to the question because I like giving people the chance to swat back at people's questions. So someone sarcastically in the comments wrote, if you've enriched to 60%, then why claim you don't have a program about nuclear enrichment? So either of you can respond to that and the nuclear Israel question.
Well, I don't. Is that Steve Witkoff in the comments?
Yeah, I know.
Because they don't know much about Iran's nuclear program. Iran, enriched to that level after the deal was ripped up by Trump. And as I said, there is civilian justification that. Right. But I think Iran is clearly hedging and using this as leverage because this is the one form of leverage they had with the United States. And so after the deal was torn up, Iran was trying to show the U.S. that there was consequences. There was a cost to doing this. Enriching up to those levels was part of the consequence that they announced. They tried to do it with much fanfare. This is all intended both for hedging purposes, but I think it became clear that, at least under Khamenei, they were not going to go for the bomb. And so they kind of lost that leverage. As far as Israel, I'm sure Rami has some good insights on this. I guess I would say, I would just say it seems unfathomable. Just politically, it seems unfathomable. Like how would people around the world react to Israel detonating a nuclear weapon like that? It seems like it would be the most isolating, self-defeating thing you could possibly do. And yet here we are after a genocide, after a war of choice that we don't see a way out of. And it seems like Netanyahu and the folks in control don't really care that much about convincing us of what they want to do. It's as Rami kind of laid out, as the propaganda has become less effective, as operations to support the campaigns of enough lawmakers to have a supermajority in Congress has waned, and there's more attention on that. Israel is sort of subscribing to the notion that even not just in geopolitics, but in politics with a capital P, might makes right, and they can do whatever they want. So I don't want to even think about it. I don't think it's going to happen, but we're in a new world, and anything seems to be possible.
Yeah. Let me unmute you, Rami. And this is not me silencing you. This is just because there's a glitch when from the background noise. I don't want people to think I'm silencing Rami. Okay.
I'd be honored if you silence me. But the nuclear issue is fascinating because it is the ultimate weapon. The Israelis did load nuclear bombs onto planes in 1973 when they thought they were losing in Sinai, but then they didn't use them. I think if they've shown in Gaza that they can achieve the same impact that a nuclear weapon does with regular weapons. So there's not a lot of difference between killing 500,000-600,000 people, which is the estimate of the total deaths in Gaza, between killing them through genocide and starvation and freezing babies, which is the latest Zionist innovation to killing your opponents, let the babies freeze. Not much difference between that and a nuclear bomb. If they really got desperate and they thought they were going to be overrun by Lebanese and Iranians and Palestinians and others, and they were going to be defeated, my guess is they probably have some small tactical nuclear weapons, sort of mini bombs, that they would detonate to show what they would be prepared to do. But I don't think it would get to that point, because if they were threatened, the US would probably step in again, and other people would step in again. I think the last thing the world will allow is another genocide of Jews. They don't mind the Jews doing a genocide, or the Israeli Jews doing the Israeli Jewish leadership, because not all Israeli Jews support the genocide. But they don't mind if the Israeli Jewish leadership does a genocide, but they don't want the Jews to suffer a genocide.
Right, yeah.
So I don't think that there's going to be a need to ever to use a nuclear weapon, but we'll see. The way things are going, we've never had a situation like this, where so many dynamics are moving together in so many different arenas with so many different consequences. But the thing we can be sure is, when the dust settles in Iran and in Lebanon and Palestine, the regional picture is going to be quite different than it has been over the past 50 years.
Right. Yes. And I think that's true, that people have accepted, the powers that be have accepted a genocide of Palestinians. I think that for Christian Zionists, it's not that they care about Jews. They just need them for their Armageddon. But, Israel, as we all know from the beginning, prioritized building a state over Jewish safety. There's that famous Ben Gurion quote where he said, if I had to choose between saving half as many Jewish children by sending them to Palestine versus twice as many by sending them to England, I would choose Palestine. We know that they opposed the Nazi boycott, before the founding of the state of Israel. Obviously, both of these things were before the founding. And, Herzl talks about how anti-Semites are going to be our greatest allies, etc. But yes, I think that probably, we'll see. Who knows? And then, of course, the Hannibal Directive and Israel killing its own throughout the Gaza genocide. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Any final thoughts from either of you for this visit? Thank you so much for your generosity and your time. Oh, let me see if there are any super chats that apply to you. No, it doesn't look like there are any questions. Just nice supportive comments. So, but any final thoughts from you?
Thank you.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah.
I will plug our poll that just came out today. So we commissioned Zogby Analytics to do a poll of the Iranian American community because I think there's this perception that we all want war and that we're all pro-Israel. There's the demonstrations, Iranian American demonstrations that have had the Israeli flag displayed prominently. There's the online, making fun of or supporting the Israeli war on Palestine. And so anyway, so what we have done several times now is, okay, let's actually look at the data. Let's actually talk to people. Let's have pollsters actually talk to people. And lo and behold, less than half of Iranian Americans supported the decision to initiate this war. And over 60% of Iranian Americans support diplomacy to reduce tensions. And this just flies in the face of everything that some people are trying to tell us. So in defense of my community, there are many of us who favor peace, who favor justice for all. And I hope that this poll helps to, we're not going to be able to replace being on CNN with Jake Tapper and Emily Schrader pretending like she is a source for what's happening on the ground in Iran. Yeah. But at least we can put some facts forward and help that get out to people so that they don't fall for this propaganda campaign.
Let's see. I have this. Here is the study. Views on U.S.-Iran war. What is your position regarding the United States initiating a war in Iran? And so these are the results, and these are Iranian Americans, right?
So this is Iranian Americans, a random sample. Now, this is the first time that support for war has been as high as it is. For years, the one thing we could say is that the supermajority of Iranian Americans were opposed to war. I think that this coming after the massacre that occurred in Iran. And then this poll took place over the first week of the war when there was some exuberance about Khamenei being eliminated and some belief that this was actually going to go in the direction that Reza Pahlavi had promised. I expect that this number will reduce significantly. But even today, or even last week, it's clear that there's no mandate for war coming from our community. At best, we are divided on this question. But on the question of, and it's a few answers down, on the question of what should we actually do, how should we actually address the situation, this is a community that favors diplomacy. And diplomacy has been made a bad word by, certain folks on CNN or elsewhere, but that really is the only tool that we have. And we're seeing what the other tool, what it does. We're seeing how war cannot actually achieve any of these goals that supposedly policymakers want to pursue.
And here's the diplomacy one, right? What is your position on diplomacy to reduce tensions between the U.S. and Iran?
Right. Yeah.
Strongly support, oppose. Okay. Right. So much more support than oppose, which is
much
good.
More support. And
yeah.
So we should be able to publicly support diplomacy and to call for our president to stop bombing people in the middle of talks, like he's done twice with Iran now.
Okay. Well, thank you both so much for coming on the show, and have a great night. Oh, let me unmute Rami. Okay. Have a great night.
Thank you for having us, and Ramadan Kareem to all who celebrate.
Ditto.
You bet.
Okay. Bye. All right. This has been great. Make sure you like the stream if you haven't already. Please do subscribe. Let's see. Let me just read some super chats, which are very nice. Let's see. Israeli nuclear weapons. The following is not speculation, but firsthand verification. In the 1990s, 25 Israeli F-15 aircraft left Boeing built to carry and deploy US B-61 series nuclear weapons. Let that sink in. Here's a thank you, Yoka. New member, thank you, Stephen. Let's see. Thank you, Creative Cardinal, for gifting a membership. Thank you, Wade Worth, for your generosity, which is always so appreciated. Thank you, Alex, for the super sticker, and thank you to the new member, Shahid Zeb 2088. Let's see. Anything else that I want to make sure that I tell people? We have a great Patreon that people should definitely come on to join if they haven't already, which is a wonderful chat with Miko Peled. Miko Peled is an former Israeli. He's anti-Zionist. He's the son of a general. He wrote an amazing book called The General's Son. In fact, I'm going to play a little bit. Let me see maybe I'll tease this Patreon, because we may have some of this. If you're watching this live, then you definitely get to see this whole thing. If you're watching this later, there may be some Patreon of this, which you can find at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. But what we definitely have is a great Patreon only excerpt of a chat that we had with Miko Peled. And I'm going to play a little bit of that. Okay. So this will give people an idea of what we have. Share screen, Miko Peled. And he talks about, we're just going to play a little bit, but he talks about the Hannibal Directive, Israel killing its own, what's going to happen if there are boots in the ground. So, and what it's like in the IDF. Okay.
On the ground in Iran.
So they put boots on the ground.
That'll be catastrophic for the United States. There's no question about that. It'll be catastrophic. The coffins draped in the American flag will be coming in amounts that I think worse than Vietnam. I mean, it's going to be really terrible. Yeah. So I think they should not underestimate Iran and not take the Iranian restraint for granted, but treat it with respect.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the exact opposite of what they should be doing. They're taking it for weakness and taking advantage of it and dealing with people who have so much more humanity, like in their fingertips than the U.S. government and the Israeli government.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Miko, one more question I have is that I was talking about this with Rania. There's a lot of discussion about the wag the tail, wag the dog. All right, that's a little teaser of it. But probably the most exciting part is when we actually talk about all the terrible things that the Israeli army does. We all know that they do terrible things to Palestinians, but also the things they do to its own. And again, it's not because we care more about this at all. Like neither Miko nor I cares more if a Jew is killed at all. It's just that it belies that Israel's whole shtick is a lie. Okay. So Brad, is there anything I have to tell people to do except to join the Patreon at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show? Please do it at the $5 a month level because you will get so much great content, hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours of extra content. Also, if you can't swing that, you can do $1 a month. So that's literally just $12 a year. And that helps make the show happen because we literally could not do the show without your support. If you are watching this live and you haven't already, please do like the stream. Please do subscribe. We're almost at 425. Are we at 425? We're at 425,000 subscribers. Let's see. What are we at? 425,000. Yay. Wow, this is great. Thanks, guys. Keep subscribing, keep liking, join the Patreon, keep paying attention, but really do subscribe because we're doing these extra streams and we like to check in with Mohammed Marandi, who joins us from Tehran. Such an important voice. So we're going to have an extra live stream this week. So make sure you tune in. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. And see you definitely next Tuesday, but we're also going to see you before then on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. Okay.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing.
Antifa!